So now it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the star of the night. Katie Greve is one of my babies. I had her when she was, 4 or 5? 18 months, sorry. 18 months. So I actually been following her all through her life and know her grades, knew where she went to college. I even offered my husband in Auckland University if she needs help, but she didn't go there. She didn't go to him, so she didn't need help. So she's one of, of great young people with cystic fibrosis that she's done an amazing job with her life. And it gives me a great pleasure to introduce her.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Katie Greve, as you know. I'm 21 and I have cystic fibrosis, as you also know. I've always been a big writer, so I'll be doing a mix of kind of presenting my slides and also reading what is effectively an essay to you. So this presentation is really exciting for me and also very nerve-wracking. I haven't done any type of public speaking since high school, when all of my high school teachers were trying to convince us that as soon as we became an adult, we get asked to be a keynote speaker, and so you have to know how to do it. You have to. And I thought at the time that it was ridiculous, and then it happened, so that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, okay. So I am going to start the night by telling you about my life today. I've had a lot of big changes, even in just this past month. I just graduated college with a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. Thank you. And so I also, the week after I graduated, started my first job, my first big job. I'm working as an IT assistant, so, mix of computer and normal scheduling assistant work. But yeah, I have to say that going from waking up whenever I want throughout all of my college years to waking up before the sun rises is a very hard transition to make. Especially trying to work in my breathing treatments and stuff in the morning. It's a lot of scheduling stuff, which is good. More practice. So yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to get to know my coworkers yet. It's very new. Most of them don't even know that I have cystic fibrosis. It almost feels like a secret identity a little bit. It's such a big part of my life, and to have people I spend every day with not know about it is kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, I also had my first clinic visit at the adult hospital last week. Yeah. Which I wasn't, I was a little bit nervous just because I spent so long, seeing Dr. Nasser and that care team. My whole life. So yeah, the transition was a little bit scary, but I also knew everybody was gonna be nice. I had a feeling I was right, thankfully. But yeah, it's just another big thing to add on top of what we've already been. It's been a crazy month. So yeah, I feel almost like when I walked across the stage and got my diploma, that they were like, hang on, wait a second, and they took a big rubber stamp that said adult and stamped my forehead, and they were like, okay, you can go now. But yeah, so everything has changed a lot. I've been super lucky with my cystic fibrosis. I've managed to stay relatively healthy for a really long time, not counting my yearly sinus infections that I get. Yeah, it means that, my life doesn't necessarily revolve around CF. It feels kind of more like it's just a part of it, which is ideal. Yeah, it doesn't come to the front of my mind unless something happens with it, which is CF is kind of like socks in that way. So hang on. Yeah, you don't necessarily note, as long as everything's going right, you don't necessarily notice it. But I don't know if you guys have ever had that thing where when you're walking, you're wearing short socks and they start to like bunch up, and it's really annoying and you can't do anything about it. That's kind of what it feels like when I get sick. But yeah, the only way I've found to get through it is you just keep going until you can either get your new socks or antibiotics in my case. But here, okay. Outside of work and school, I spend a lot of time with my family and friends, many of whom are very excited to watch the recording of this presentation with me once it is posted online. Yeah, so these are all the people in my life, plus Kona, our dog, who is very cute but not a good enough listener to be an effective part of the support system. So, yeah, I've gotten to try a lot of new things and find so many amazing people in my life, and I love my life, honestly. I'm really grateful for it, especially knowing how much work goes into staying healthy and happy. When I was diagnosed, I was diagnosed at 18 months old because newborn genetic testing or screening for CF wasn't required until 2010, and I was born in 2003, so I missed that one. For the first year and a half of my life, my weight fluctuated a lot. My parents took me to see my pediatrician, and I was told, my pediatrician said that I was failing to thrive, basically. She sent me to an endocrinologist at U of M, who took one look at me and then sent me for a sweat chloride test, which measured the amount of salt in someone's sweat, and they were frequently used to diagnose CF prior to 2010, since people who have CF, excrete more salt than normal. And some of this has been, covered by the other presenters, but normal sweat chloride levels are below 30, and levels over 60 are highly indicative of CF. Since my levels were over 80, it made my diagnosis pretty much a done deal. When my parents took me to see Dr. Nasser for the first time, they had a lot of questions for her. One of them had to do with my life expectancy, which was also discussed prior by other speakers. So when I was born in 2003, the median life expectancy for someone with CF was 37. And in 2023, it was 61. I'm super grateful for all the progress that's been made, especially because without it, I would have had my midlife crisis at 17, and no one was gonna let me buy a sports car at that time. But in all seriousness, that is a massive increase, and it means so much for everyone with CF and the people that love them. The advancements that have been made, even in just the past 20 years, will mean that now, more than ever, people with CF will be able to take care of their parents when they grow old and live long enough to see their children grow up. At that first appointment, Dr. Nasser told my parents they should expect me to take care of them as they got old. People with CF will get to spend more of their lives just feeling like people instead of patients. So, one of the other things that Dr. Nasser told my parents at my first appointment was to treat me like a normal kid who just needed some extra help. My parents embraced that idea wholeheartedly. I went to school, I made friends, I took piano lessons and did gymnastics. I even got to take horseback riding lessons as kind of a pilot program. I was a guinea pig to see if, someone with CF their lungs could manage in a barn. The barn that I went to was very clean. That was part of it, kind of had to be. But yeah, so a lot of exciting things, sometimes even from CF that I got to do. But yeah, my family also, we went tent camping and took road trips all over the country. I still had to do my breathing treatments and take my pills and go to my doctors, but it all felt incredibly normal. It just felt to me like I had, a different bedtime routine than most of my friends when I was a kid. Plus, having CF meant that any and all food that would make me gain weight was a good thing, which means that I remember feeling very special whenever I got to tell my friends that pizza was good for me. But my family and friends never treated me like I was that different from them, and that made it so much easier for me to embrace the things I had to do to maintain my health. That brings me to my first big point for this presentation. Managing cystic fibrosis is a team sport. When the person with CF is young, there's so much that falls to the adults who care for them. No 5-year-old is learning what a bronchodilator is before they learn to tie their shoes. For anyone who isn't familiar, bronchodilators are medications that relax and open the airways in the lungs for the people who have respiratory conditions. I'm incredibly grateful to my parents for finding ways to make my treatments fun. My mom would read aloud to me every night, which helped pass the time quickly, and also inspired my love of reading, which is a big part of my life. On other nights, we would play board games as a family or watch movies during my treatments. I started using pill cases when I was really young as well. My parents filled them for me, and I made sure to take them. The cases also made it easier to be more independent at a younger age. I didn't have to know what each pill was, I just had to make sure I took them. As I got older, I learned more about the medications I was on, of course, and ended up taking over the pill case process. There have always been a lot of people in my life who have collaborated with me to manage my health. My parents and friends are big contributors, but my doctors and care team are huge with that as well. When I was diagnosed, my parents set up Google alerts about CF. That meant that with each new study or breakthrough, they would get to learn about them as soon as they came out. If there was something that seemed relevant to me, they would print out the information and bring it to my clinic visit to ask questions. The care team helps by doing their jobs, making sure, ensuring my health is stable and helping us figure out what to do when it's not. But I wanna really highlight the benefits of asking the team questions. Ask about research you've read, ask about what medications do and why they're being prescribed, ask about new treatment options. You need to be your own advocate, and if you're a parent, you need to advocate for your child. My parents learned about vibrating vests from an article. The vests vibrate the chest of the person wearing it in a way that helps break up mucus so it's easier to cough out. The precursor to the vest was manual percussion, which involves gently hitting the chest or back to break up the mucus. My parents did manual percussion on me for years, and my mom even tried to teach some of the teachers at preschool how to do it, but it was very time-consuming and a little bit awkward. So when my parents found out about vests being an option and that they would make things a lot easier, they asked at clinic if that was an option for me, and it was. So I ended up getting my first vest before I even started kindergarten. In the bottom right picture there, I'm wearing the vest, my first one I ever got. And then there's a little bit of a comparison photo here in the middle. So when I was 5, those were the pills and medications I was on the top picture. And then the one on the bottom is what, my pills and general med routine looks like today. So, some different changes. Everything definitely looks a lot newer and more sparkly now, but when I started kindergarten, my mom helped me put together a little picture book about what my life with cystic fibrosis was like. The pictures came straight from the book, and so the purpose of the book was to kind of, I read it to my classmates when I started kindergarten so that they got information. They kind of knew, it explained some of the things that might be unusual to them, like when I would take my Creon pills before eating snacks and things along those lines. My parents had already met with the teachers prior to kind of explain my needs, but so it was helpful, but it worked out. I even had some friends at the time who would try to help me manage things. In elementary school, I had to go down to the office to get my pills because I couldn't carry them. And one of my friends would always ask me once I got to the cafeteria for lunch if I remembered to take my pills. I was usually on top of it, but she did save me a couple times, which I always appreciate. So a few months into starting kindergarten, I had a sick visit with my primary doctor because I was coughing and showing signs of a sinus infection. When she listened to my lungs, she said that there was a crackle, which was concerning. She called my pulmonologist, and before I knew it, they were admitting me to the hospital for IV antibiotics. And that was when I got my first PICC line, which is a peripherally inserted central catheter, which is kind of like an IV with a longer tube so that medicine can get delivered as close to the heart as possible. I didn't feel too sick when I went to the hospital, so it wasn't super distressing for me. I kind of had a blast, actually. I had friends and family come to visit and bring me presents. The hospital staff gave me crafts and stuffed animals and just about anything I wanted, because everybody feels bad for the 5-year-old in the hospital. But I got so many gifts and things. It took a second wheelchair to take it all to the car when we left. But my parents called it princess time. But yeah, my favorite part was that I had a captive audience. I've always really enjoyed making people laugh, and when I was in there, I had all the time to try. I was teaching the respiratory therapists like how to play card games I'd learned in preschool, and like drawing them pictures, all sorts of things like that. I'm really grateful for everyone who helped make my first hospital stay a fun one instead of a scary one. And I feel so lucky that I've had so many people in my life who've helped me manage my health and keep my spirits up, whether it was, a friend I've had my whole life or someone who took care of me for one shift 15 years ago. But everyone has the ability to make a difference in others' lives, and it's so important to lean on each other. For the next 6 years, I didn't get sick again, which meant that I spent those years feeling pretty normal. I still followed my routines and had to take my medications, do my doctor's appointments and everything, but it was all very standard for me. Off to the far right there is me doing my pulmonary function test, which is my lung function test, that I still do regularly. But yeah, and then one to the left is Halloween, obviously. Yeah, my sibling is hiding under the bush. It was staged. But yeah, during those times, there was a lot of CF events that I would participate in. There's Great Strides, the picture with the blue balloons in the background is a Great Strides event. And yeah, there was various fundraising efforts for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I had my photo taken to be in a calendar for the Bunnell Foundation back in 2013. You can see little Miss August up there. But yeah, it was throughout this time that I learned a lot about my disease and my care, which, yeah, when I had time and energy to learn about it, I feel like it's really important to, if you do have some time where health isn't the biggest concern, that's the ideal time to teach and learn about it, because then it doesn't have to be the main focus. It can just kind of be an additional, time. But yeah, it's important to find ways to help children take over managing their health as they grow up, so that they're able to gain more independence and are ready when they transition to adult care. When I was in 6th grade, I had to be hospitalized again for PICC antibiotics as the result of a sinus infection. My CF symptoms have always presented more in my sinuses than my lungs. I wouldn't necessarily have respiratory infections, but that heavily impacted my breathing. It would be more, stuffy nose, sore throat, symptoms kind of like that. I was disappointed when I had to be admitted that year because we had to reschedule my birthday party. It was gonna be a pool party, but I couldn't swim with a PICC line in. So yeah, there's a lot of logistical work that goes into managing chronic illness. But having to schedule and reschedule events has honestly helped me improve my time management skills and just organizing my life around my priorities. If I'm going to have to deal with it my whole life, at least I'd get some good skills out of it. The antibiotic I was on during this course was strong and actually ended up causing vestibular damage in my inner ear, which could have caused issues with dizziness, balance issues, or other problems, kind of like that. Thankfully, I didn't have noticeable issues with it, but I did have to do the testing. The second picture is me doing the testing. And, well, I was in the testing chamber pretending to be a fighter pilot, but it was the same situation. And then off to the one right next to it to the right is me in my first ambulance ride. It was just a normal transport to Mott. I don't remember why I needed it, but I was very happy. I'm waving. You can kind of see it. But yeah, so I always try to find the silver lining in my life, because there always is one. And when things get hard, I hold on to the good things really tightly. Every time I've been at the hospital, I've been in the same unit that's on the top floor of Mott. That means that at the very least, I always have a gorgeous view to look at, and seeing, someone canoe down the river, or being able to see the sunset, the colors change on the sun sets on the other side of the building, made it a little bit more bearable. I could always look out and just see something usually nice. But yeah, throughout the slides, I have a handful of pictures I've taken out that window. So yeah, I'll point them out to you guys as we go. All right, yes, 2016 ended up being a very mixed year for me. The earlier part of the year was fantastic. My family and I went on a road trip to New York City, which was amazing for me. I've always loved getting to go to big cities, and there were all the famous landmarks and just the people, everything. It was awesome. But that year, I also established some lifelong friendships, and even found out that I was eligible for a wish from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I got told a few times not to pick Disney because everyone picks Disney, which was honestly fine with me because I wanted to go to Paris. The foundation had a party for me to celebrate the trip, even though it wasn't until the next year. The picture at the bottom with me and my parents was taken at that party. And then for the not so fun stuff of 2016, in September, I found out my parents were getting divorced. It was a hard thing to come to terms with, but I was also preoccupied with another sinus infection. So I ended up just kind of not focusing on that. I was like, I'll come back to that later when I've got time. Yeah, I ended up having to, for that sinus infection, I ended up having to be admitted again to the hospital. Throughout that year leading up to the admission, my lung function had been steadily dropping, and no one knew why. Because not a lot, nothing had changed. But yeah, and my numbers had been largely consistent my whole life, so this was odd and concerning. But yeah, as a result of the drop in my lung function numbers, my care team also wanted me to have a bronchoscopy when I was admitted. So to do this, they put me under anesthesia and used a long, thin tube with a camera attached to examine my lungs. They wanted to see if there was any obvious reason for the decline, like, a bunch of mucus or something like that in my lungs, but they instead just looked healthy and pink, which was definitely a good thing, even though it didn't give us any answers. During the course of my admission, I had to get a chest x-ray done. When I did, we discovered the reason for my decreased lung function, which was scoliosis, which was perfect because I was getting a little bored just managing the CF. But yeah, so somehow in the span of 1 year between my annual x-rays, I developed a 60-degree curve in my spine. The doctors said it was idiopathic, which just kind of meant nobody knew what the cause was. You can see the curve. It's pretty distinct, and then the picture next to it is me at the time sitting up as straight as I could, which was not very straight. The reason my lung function was declining was because my spine was pressing on my lungs and causing my airways to be obstructed. After I finished my course of PICC antibiotics, I got referred to an orthopedic surgeon to, examine me and decide what the best course of action was. That appointment was towards the end of October. My parents took me that day, and I remembered being nervous about what the doctor was going to recommend. My nerves were also not helped by the fact that my mom had a work Halloween party to go to afterwards and decided it was just easier to wear her Joan Jett costume to the appointment. So, count yourself lucky if you've never been a self-conscious 13-year-old who had a mom who never cared about what other people thought. It's definitely, not caring what other people think is the ideal way to be, but you don't really realize that until you stop being a teenager. But when the doctor came to talk to us, he recommended that I get a spinal fusion surgery. There were other potential treatment options, but since I was already suffering from negative effects of my spine pressing on my lungs, they wanted a solution that was more quickly acting. I had the surgery in December 2016. They fused my thoracic vertebrae from T4 to T12 with 2 titanium rods that they screwed into my spine. The surgery was a huge success, as you can see. My spine's curvature went from over 60 degrees to less than 30, and my lung function numbers quickly improved. The recovery after the surgery was long and probably hard, but I don't remember most of it at this point. 9 years and a load of pain medication will do that to you. But since then, I've struggled with chronic back pain issues, and it's something I've gotten used to at this point, that, it can almost stay in the background of my life unless I have a flare-up or something. I found things that can sometimes help, but nothing makes it go away completely. A bunch of pictures from the recovery process. But while I was recovering, I wasn't able to go to school for a month, and when I was able to go back, I was only doing half days, which meant I missed a ton of school. I had to work with my teachers to find accommodations that worked, and even still, I struggled to pass. School went from being something I was good at to being something I wanted to avoid at all costs, and that was a hard transition to deal with. I felt like I lost a part of who I was through circumstances I had no control over. I had been managing my CF pretty well my whole life, and instead of that being enough, something else had to come and, take me out. When you have a chronic illness, there's a level of adaptability that you're forced to develop at a very early age. Things change, and you have to change with it, whether you're ready to or not. I always took issue with the phrase, accept the things you can't change and change the things you can't accept, because I heard it sometimes but never felt like it actually applied to me. There's only so much you can actually change in one go with chronic illness, but yeah, I still have difficulty with that at times, just the accepting part. I sometimes feel like, I'm just waiting to suddenly get really sick or something else, that there's gonna be some big decline that I can't control. There's this feeling of almost being haunted. Most of the time, CF is just something that I'm super used to, so I don't think that much about it. But then there are other times when I feel like if I make too many wrong moves, it's gonna catch up to me. And I've found, honestly, that the best thing, and it's definitely not always easy, but it's the same thing, the silver lining, finding the things, even just day to day, the small things that I appreciate that I can hold on to when, just trying to come to terms with the fact that there are a lot of hard things that I just have to deal with. But so early in 2017, my dad moved out of the house and into his new place that was luckily only a few miles from my mom's house, so definitely could have been more difficult. My sibling was 18 at the time, so my parents let them choose what they wanted to do. They decided to stay at my mom's house, but my parents split custody of me. Originally, the week was broken up evenly between them, but I had a really hard time with that because as soon as I started getting settled, I had to up and switch back and, take all of my pills, make sure I didn't forget anything. It was a little bit of a mess. So I talked to my parents, and we all agreed that it made more sense to just switch week by week, which worked out a lot better. There were so many things that had to be done to make it so I could stay at my dad's new place. Instead of just buying things like the classic drugstore shampoo, I had to get another nebulizer and a vest and more pill cases and the pills to go in those pill cases, just to make sure, you know, I could stay on top of everything in 2 different places. In the summer of 2017, I went to Paris with the help of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which ended up being a really amazing experience. My family took a lot of road trips while I was growing up, but we had never truly considered an international trip since we were unsure how to manage all of the, you know, all of my medications and equipment and just the TSA complexities related to it. My liquid medications and nebulizer machine that probably looks very suspicious on an x-ray, you know, were big considerations. My care team was incredibly helpful, working out what I needed to make the trip not only possible, but easy. Anytime I fly, I make sure to have a doctor's note explaining that I have a condition that requires me to have medication and various medical devices with me on the plane. With that, I'm usually able to move through airport security without much hassle. And then the other thing that made trips easier was the Aerobica, which is a smaller kind of handheld device that I was able to use in place of my vest because it also helps break up the mucus. And not having to lug my, at the time, giant vest around made vacations about 100 times easier. The trip itself was like a dream. I got to see, you know, the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe and explore a city centuries older than any we have in the US. The food there was amazing too. I still think that picture of the pasta on the bottom left, I think about that sometimes. I have not been able to recreate it. I don't know what they did. It just looks kind of normal, but like it was so good. And then also in Paris, when you go to a restaurant, instead of just giving you like bread, they give you bread and cheese, which is a genius idea, and I don't know why we haven't done more of that here as well. But yeah, the trip was a magical experience. Having the extra help from my care team meant that I didn't have to worry about any of the logistical stuff with my medications, and I got to not only feel like a normal kid, but a really cool normal kid who was in Paris. And it was really exciting. Quick thing. I get dehydrated a lot more than the average person, so. But yes, unfortunately, my hospital visit in 2016 was the start of a trend where I would be hospitalized for antibiotics every year in the same week of October. It was so consistent that it became kind of a running joke and also a reoccurring fear. There would always be some anxiety when fall rolled around. Every sneeze felt like rolling the dice and hoping I didn't land on the go directly to the hospital square. The anxiety was bad, but I've always been a planner, so the consistency did make it easier to prepare for future years. And it wasn't all bad either. I did get to do stage crew for my school's theater department, so I would help build sets for school plays. And in 2017, I had been planning to go to homecoming with my friends. I bought a dress I really liked, which is the one I'm wearing off to the left there, and was really excited that, you know, to go with them until I got sick and found out I was going to be in the hospital on the day that dance was happening, but I was able to adjust my antibiotic schedule so I could still go. And then I had a Cinderella moment, you know, which was very cool. I had another admission in 2018 and one in early 2019, but they were relatively uneventful, thank God. And I got my first job in the summer of 2019, where I worked as a barista. That's me after I just got the job on the top right of the screen. Sorry, I keep pointing over there, and sorry guys. But yeah, and so I got my first job. That was exciting. And then at the end of 2019, I got sick once more and went to the hospital. This one was a doozy. First off, it was the first year I had ever gotten hospitalized twice, because there was the one in the spring and then the one again in the fall. And I remember a lot of worries about my overall health declining. You know, I was scared that this was like an omen of worse to come. But, you know, someone suggested I think about getting a port, which is an implant that gives easier access to the bloodstream so that people who regularly need IV antibiotics don't have to deal with as many needle pokes. They make so many people's lives a lot easier, but it was a particularly hard thing for me to hear as someone who hadn't thought that would be necessary. I didn't end up needing to get one, but it was a scary thing thinking about it at the time. This fall visit was standard at first. I was in the hospital for a few days to get my PICC line placed and to check the antibiotic levels to make sure that they were good and stable and I could go home. So, you know, that all went fine. I went home, and then a week later, tragedy struck. And that's excessive. I'm kidding, mostly. But I started having pain near the site of my PICC, which I had never experienced before. I felt a lump starting to grow and called the doctor to ask what we should do. They had me come into the ER so they could perform an ultrasound on my arm, which when they did, they discovered there was a blood clot growing, so I had to be admitted again, because you don't want that. Well, there the second time, the doctors determined that the clot was superficial, which means that it was in a vein close to the surface of my arm. Superficial clots are generally not as dangerous, but there are rare cases where they could travel to the lungs and cause a pulmonary embolism, so definitely want to deal with that still. The doctors put me on oral blood thinners and watched me for a few days before determining that I was okay to be discharged. I went home again and everything was great for a few days until I started feeling more pain where the blood clot was instead of less. I wasn't sure if I should give the blood thinners like some more time to work, but I grew up learning how important it is to kind of like trust yourself, especially when something could be wrong. It's always better to be safe than sorry, and I know people say that, but it's true. That's why they say it. But yeah, so we called the doctor again, came in, ultrasound, that process, and we found that the clot was getting bigger instead of smaller. So everyone just decided that I should finish the antibiotics course in the hospital as opposed to trying to go home again. And while there, I had to start injecting blood thinners, which wasn't too hard to learn how to give myself the injections, but the actual process of giving myself shots twice a day, every day, took a big toll on me. Especially, I used to be deathly afraid of needles, so, you know, it wasn't fun. But, yeah, while I was finishing my course of antibiotics, we kept a close eye on the clot and confirmed that it was getting smaller. Once the course was done, I got my PICC removed and went home, but I had to keep doing the blood thinner shots for a few months afterwards. I added the shots to my routine pretty easily by stacking my habits. I did the shots after I took my breakfast and nighttime pills, and since I always took my pills, I always did the shots. When I went home after that third admission, I was worn out both physically and mentally. I'd been trying to juggle my health, school, stage crew, and my job all at the same time. And there were multiple days of going from school straight to crew or work where I would have to give myself blood thinner injections in the bathroom. And after a couple times doing that, you kind of like, okay, something has to change. So my job and stage crew were the first to go. They were the easiest, they were optional. But yeah, so letting go of those two let me have more time to focus on trying to catch up on all of the school that I had missed, which in total I'd missed about 3 or 4 weeks. And when you think about having 6 classes every day and an assignment in every class, you get a sense of just how much I was trying to make up. It was incredibly difficult. My mental health suffered a lot during this time. Going to school at all made me so anxious I almost couldn't function. Every time I'd walk into class, I'd feel terrified that I was gonna get in trouble about my missing work. Even once I wasn't sick anymore, my anxiety kept me home more days than not, which only made the problem snowball. My mom helped me immeasurably during these times. We figured out that the best thing to do was have me focus on the assignments with the highest point values and just kind of skip the lower value ones to kind of, get as many points as possible with little work. Yeah, but it was during this time that I learned what it really means to prioritize my health above everything else, even school. This was really hard for me. The fact that it doesn't always matter what I want to do or focus on. There will be times that I have to sacrifice what I care about to make sure that my health doesn't suffer. I'm a slowly recovering perfectionist, and it's slow. But that's always made it so much harder for me to let go of things. I've always wanted to do everything, and after letting go of my job and my extracurriculars already, it made me want to hold even tighter to my school and my grades. I had spent so much of my life being able to focus on it, so to go from being a straight A student to being somebody who was forced to be okay with barely passing was honestly kind of crushing. I think that might be the hardest part about living with CF, is that it steals choices from me. There will be things that you don't even realize you care about until you realize that through no fault of your own, you will never be able to do them. I wish I had a good answer about how to deal with that. I really do, because then not only could I tell you all, but I would know it. I've heard so many people throughout my life recommend letting go of the stuff that doesn't matter, which I always acknowledged with a secret eye roll and a mental groan, because yeah, that'd be great. But what I found to be the most beneficial is to take a step back and just try to get some perspective. It doesn't always help at the time, because anxiety often ends up acting as kind of a veil that hides what the real world actually looks like and what's really important. But I remember the relief I felt when I found out one of my friend's older sisters did not well in high school, and she ended up being just fine. She got into her dream college, she got her dream job. It was just a huge relief, kind of being able to point to somebody else's life as proof that, I could have that. I could have everything I wanted, despite having a time where everything was really hard and just seemed, insurmountable. But yeah, little tangent here. No CF presentation would be complete without mentioning modulators. I've been on Trikafta since 2019, and I wasn't one of the people whose lung functions shot up or who stopped getting sick. But honestly, I kind of like to think of it as my health could have declined if I hadn't started taking it, and that helps with that. But it's also it is so exciting to see all of everything it's done for other people. It's a really good sign of everything that can keep happening in the future. And yeah, so after several months of being on the drug, I got a sweat test done again, for the first time since I was originally diagnosed. Instead of being over 80, my sweat chloride levels came back at 32, which is a huge change. And if that had been the number that I originally came back with, the first test came back with, there would only be, a potential that I had CF. And I was so excited to hear that, because even though it didn't make that big of a change for me, it changed other people's lives in such huge ways. And yeah, there's so many good things yet to come that I'm really excited to see and hear about and maybe even be a part of. So not long after I went on Trikafta, I had to figure out how to process another huge change, and so did all of us. So yeah, the world changed very quickly, and everyone had to adjust to a new normal. The thing is, everybody just kind of had to adjust to my normal. And admittedly, online school wasn't something I had experienced beforehand. But outside of that, I was kind of used to COVID protocols since I'd been following those practices my whole life. Yeah, you know, don't spend time with people who are sick, stay 6 feet away from others, you know, hand sanitize, wear a mask. I even had, you know, with multiple admissions that I had to be quarantined to my room because I had a certain virus. The pandemic was absolutely devastating to so many people in so many different ways, and I don't want to understate that in the slightest. But there was also a part of me that felt like people were finally able to understand parts of my life that they wouldn't have otherwise. I don't want to say I'm grateful for that, because I would have far, far preferred that everybody stay safe and healthy instead of walking a mile in my shoes, but it did make me feel understood on a much bigger scale than I had felt before. The pandemic also meant that I was being more careful with my health than ever. I remember my mom calling one morning when I was at school in March, when we were still there, and effectively telling me to come home because there was a confirmed COVID case in Michigan, which meant there were about to be a lot of them. Later that week, everyone got word that school was transitioning to be virtual for an indefinite amount of time, and I never went back. I did have the option to go back in person for my senior year, but the risk just wasn't worth it to me, and I also, frankly, loved being at home. But yeah, I didn't get sick at all in 2020 or 2021, probably because of quarantining from germs. But it also meant that for the first time since I was like 11, that I was getting enough sleep again, which I'm sure also helped keep me healthier. I didn't have to constantly fear that if I got sick, I was gonna fall so far behind that I couldn't catch up, because, well, one, that was what everybody was worried about. But also, I could still go to class if I was sick. I just had to join a Zoom call. I had never considered online school as a possibility, and I honestly wish it was something I could have embraced sooner, at least to some extent. But college, you can see the two pictures. Those are both out the window at Mott, the landscape pictures. But yeah, so when I went to college in 2021, COVID was still a huge thing. My in-person classes required masks, and many of my classes just kind of stayed virtual because it was easier and avoided any extra risks. I got accommodations to have a dorm with no roommate since I didn't want to deal with germs, and any of the other terrible things that come with roommates, like piles of dirty laundry or like hair in the shower, and yeah, it was a win-win. I did not want to deal with that. But yeah, I also had to have housing accommodations, so I had a fridge for the medicine, I had to keep cold, and an air conditioner since heat and humidity can affect my lung function. While I was in college, I set my own class schedule, which meant I got to make sure that I was getting enough sleep, that I had enough time to just manage everything I had to manage. And I only ever had 1 or 2 actual classes to go to, so the number of assignments ended up being far fewer than in high school. I got sick far less and was finally able to stay on top of things again. Doing better in my college classes made me realize that my struggles in high school weren't because I wasn't trying hard enough, or I wasn't smart enough, or I was just lazy. It highlighted that more than anything else, my health was and will always take precedence. And if I don't listen, it will make me listen. I did end up getting hospitalized again in 2022, 2023, and 2024. But those admissions were all in the spring and much easier for me to manage. But the timing combined, yeah, it was so much easier. The way I structured my college classes, all of the online classes, it was all just so much easier to deal with. But yeah, so even getting sick annually didn't keep me from doing work I was proud of. Also, little brag here, but I graduated with a 3.9 GPA, which I'm super proud of, considering my high school GPA was around half that. But I also met more people in college and built my support system, and yeah, just met so many great people that I plan on holding on to for the rest of my life. But that is one of the biggest things I want you all to take away from my presentation, is the idea that we can't do it alone. And I mean any of us, like people with CF, caregivers, family, friends, people who have no connection to CF whatsoever, is that we need people and we need care and support, whether it has to do with, chronic illness or mental health or just managing the everyday things. It's hard to be alive, like it really is. And the people in my life have saved me every single day in a million different ways, and that's something I will be unendingly grateful for. The other biggest thing I want you to remember is that there are so many beautiful and hopeful things around us everywhere. It's easy to forget and get caught up in the details of life, but then you look up and realize, and you see things that you might have missed, that might have gotten hidden in everything else. And it's just, it's important to notice those things. I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that you should never feel the bad things or the hard things, because trying not to feel them makes it harder. But what I'm trying to get at is that you also have to make sure you're letting yourself see and feel the good things too. There's always beauty in the darkness, and there's always hope despite it all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Every day I see CF kids, I see kids with CF in my clinic, and every day I learn from them. This has really been fascinating to me, and I'm not kidding. I mean, your presentation really, I can take a lot from it. So it is, at the end of the day, we all need support system, we all need each other, and who does it more than my kids? So with that, if you have any question, Tom, do you want to come over? Alex? If you have any question for any of us, please go ahead. And Kathy is in there with the microphone.
Hello? I have a microphone if anybody has a question. Put your hand up, and Julie has one as well. I am wondering, this may be a question for your mom, Katie, but the kindergarten book.
Yes.
Do you have that in a template, or is it on Etsy, or? She went to Kinko's to get it printed. It was probably a PowerPoint presentation. If you remember any of it, you have my email.
I still have the whole book. I could send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yes, right. And if you don't have it, just find it. Like, go through your stuff. Because that would help a lot of others. And again, we I don't like the word steal, but we borrow from each other.
You can steal it.
That's it, leveraging.
Leveraging. I have a question over here.
I'm just curious if the federal government is yet making donations or assisting with research for cystic fibrosis at a federal level.
That's federal level, right? They've taken away the stuff.
Sure. Yes. So the NIH, for example, is still supporting CF research. As everyone might know, there are a number of changes currently with the new administration in terms of funding for research in general. But the hope is that, yes, there will continue to be support. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to that.
Well, the CF Foundation is very active in lobbying, so they've been lobbying heavily the NIH and the federal government to make sure they continue the support. The problem is that if you have grants already from the NIH, they can cut it. And that's what the foundation is doing. And also the foundation is trying to supplement what is cut, so that way we don't lose researchers in the field.
I would just say such an important question about CF, but really biomedical research in general. And I encourage you all to lobby, such that research isn't cut like we expect it might be.
Got one here.
I was just wondering, when you were in school and you had to take all of those days off, were you behind in your grades also? Like, did they make you hold back a grade?
Yes, I did. I had a 504 plan, which meant that my teachers had to work to accommodate me. There was a lot of that needed to happen. And luckily, they were willing to work with me, but they also had to. But yeah, so it meant that, my grades weren't great, but I was able to stay in the right grade. Like, I didn't have to get held back or anything, which was fantastic, and I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, if you have questions, I would, 504 plan, definitely.
Talk to your social worker.
Yes, yeah.
When you're in school.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about when you had your slides up, you had a reference on there that was talking about the decreased sweat chloride level, but you didn't go into talking about the impact that has. So like in Katie's case, where that came down a lot, but we didn't necessarily see the changes. Can you talk a little bit about what that actually means?
Really good question. Generally, we think there's some correlation with sweat chloride effects in FEV1, but when you look at the individual person, it doesn't necessarily always completely align. So I guess that's the best I can answer the question. What is the value of getting the sweat chloride down another, I think it was like somewhere 5 to 10 milliequivalents from the benefit that Trikafta already has over maybe 60 years or 70 years of life is something that we just have to speculate on right now. You could see that the lung function between the two drugs didn't budge at all, which I think is a more important outcome, at least in the shorter term. But hopefully it's a really good question. Hopefully we'll get smarter. I know I didn't answer it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so my kids come to me all the time. I said, okay, my sweat test now went from 100 to 40. What that mean? It means nothing to me. As a treating physician, I'm treating the patient as they are, or the kids as they are. So yes, the sweat test is exciting, seeing dropping, but I really have to correlate that with lung function, weight, height, admission to the hospital, or of the other things. So it's exciting. And then some of the kids will tell me, okay, I don't have CF anymore. It's like, yes, you do. If you stop the drug, you will go up again, and you have symptoms. So yes, you still have CF. So yeah, so what the sweat test mean is good, but I don't know clinically is that going to help me or not.
I was noticing the modulative therapy. Exactly, what is that?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of the, what we consider our old treatments that Katie nicely showed, the nebulizers, those really were attacking the mucus after it was already thick and infected, but didn't really get to the cause of cystic fibrosis, which is, first of all, this mutation in the cystic fibrosis gene, but then that mutation causes the protein that gene makes to not function. As long as there's a protein being made that's not functional, the idea was, could we come in with a small widget, which is the drug that would all of a sudden allow that defective protein to start functioning more normally. So these modulators are basically little drugs that come and act with the CF protein, and it's like a missing part that allows it. Think of it as a motor that's missing its carburetor. You add the carburetor and the motor can start functioning. Generally not completely normally, but much better. And by allowing it to function better, then health gets better as well. Was that helpful?
She said kinda. That was pretty
Kinda.
good.
Well, let me finish it.
Yeah, finish it.
So it's like, you're having something that's not working. Your car is broken and you need the car to work. So you're going to take it to the mechanic to fix it. So this is something that, would help with that. And the ideal is gene therapy. So to replace that gene that's not working by a gene that's normal, but we're not there yet. So this is close to it. It works on the level of the cells in the lungs and in the other organs to correct it, to make sure the gene is functional. Right now, the CF gene is not working in the CF patient's lungs or digestive system. So that one help it be more normalized. So you can actually have the main defect is the chloride, which is in sweat test. You go up and down as it should. Your airways are well hydrated. So it's mainly fixing the problem, but not totally. So it's very important to use it to be able to work as good as you can with at the cellular level, at the lower level of your lung kind of thing. And I don't know if your child is qualified for modulators or not. So but if he is, let's do it. Because it's been, when Trikafta came, I actually, with the others, I've been giving the choices to family, but when Trikafta came, because I was part of the studies and I saw the benefit, I would just say, or the ivacaftor as well. It's like, no, I want you to try it. So I'm, usually we like to have it as a discussion, but because I know what I know, I would like, let's do it. And then see if it doesn't help you, then we can take it away. So it's becoming really more of it fixes the problem. It's a fixer, if you will.
What was confusing me was the fact that I saw side effects, headaches, and brain fogs, not frogs, fogs.
Right. Any medications have side effects. So this is side effects that we monitor very closely. So, if you take aspirin, you're going to worry about your liver function. If you make any medication you take has to have side effects. And these ones we really watch and monitor closely. If you have.
Yeah. Did you have a little bit more from your question, or? No. Yeah. Yeah, we don't. As Dr. Nasser said, sometimes we don't know why the side effects occur. The brain fog, we don't really know why it occurs. Fortunately, it's pretty uncommon. Yeah. Very small percent of people. So I showed that slide, but the vast majority of people are doing just really great on the medication. Yeah, and tolerating it fine.
Actually, my favorite story is that a patient, 25-year-old young man from Egypt that tried Trikafta. He was in 2 liters of oxygen around the clock, and he couldn't even walk without getting tired and cannot handle it. I just saw him. He's been on Trikafta for about 4 months now. He's on room air during the day. He's in 1 liter at night. He said, I'm working 8 hours a day. He never worked in his life. And so we have Ramadan where we fast, and he never was able to fast more than a day. He fasted 2 weeks this year. So that just kind of brought tears to my eyes. But I'm not saying that everybody on it will have the same effects, but it's worth trying because it's such a potential for it is great.
Another question over here. This one's for Katie. So, since starting Trikafta, has your medication regimen changed at all? It might not be applicable because I know you've had hospital admissions, but I know that there has been some Simplify studies.
Yes, yeah. So no huge changes now/yet. One of my inhalers that I've been on my whole life, we decreased the amount I was doing it. So instead of 2 puffs twice a day, every day, it's down to 1 puff once a day, which is huge. And actually, at my first adult clinic visit, we talked about decreasing potentially in the future more of my breathing treatment regimen, which would be huge because I've been doing basically the same thing for my whole life. And so the idea that I could eventually even potentially put my nebulizer away unless I got sick, put it in the closet, was a huge, I don't even know what to do with that yet. So it's really exciting, everything that, could come from this.
I actually have another question for Katie. I know with dietary needs and stuff, high calorie, keep your weight up and whatnot. Are there any other dietary, not restrictions, but things that you try to follow? I know they brought up cystic fibrosis related diabetes can be an issue. Is there anything that you do to prevent that, or are you just eating like anyone else would?
Honestly, pretty normal. I have a lot of stomach and GI issues, which is pretty normal for CF because mucus can get kind of built up in the stomach too. And, pancreatic insufficiency that comes with that, so taking my enzymes. But honestly, I probably should be eating a little bit more carefully, but it hasn't gone too badly, just eating whatever I want. So, but in terms of CF-related diabetes, it hasn't been a huge concern. I do the yearly regular testing, which they talked about a little bit, and that the drink, Dr. Nasser wasn't kidding, the drink is disgusting. It's so gross. But outside of just, regular testing, monitoring, and I basically just try to eat like a normal healthy person, like with the, fruits and vegetables, stuff they recommend. So.
So actually what they eat is not causing diabetes. So it's something that's, it just comes in. It's just, in CF is more common, so that's why we test for it, but has nothing to do with what they eat. So we actually encourage them to eat whatever they like. I mean, a lot of my kids eat ice cream, in the middle of the night. Sometimes I tell them to slow down when their weight is good. Whatever hamburger with cheese on, we encourage, where is Stacy? She's gonna kill me. We don't restrict them in any way, and that's not causing diabetes like what they eat.
Talking about pancreatic insufficiency that you mentioned, Dr. Nasser, have you seen much of a change with modulator therapy now? Have people become more pancreatic sufficient since starting Trikafta?
I don't think so. They're maybe needing less enzymes, but nobody that I'm aware of. Amy, have you seen it? Have you? Yeah, we have never seen anybody. Also, the same thing for Pseudomonas. Would that make them not have Pseudomonas anymore? They do get Pseudomonas. So no. We might not need to increase the enzymes from time to time, as we usually do. We might decrease the dose a little bit, but one patient told us that she's pancreatic sufficient now, that she doesn't take any enzymes, and she's fine with it, fecal elastase, and yes, she is still pancreatic insufficient. She just was in denial.
I have a question for Katie. You have such an optimistic outlook on life, despite everything you've been through. I'm just curious if there's anything in particular, especially during admissions, that helped keep your spirits up.
Definitely, and I know I talked about it some, but having great people, honestly, in my life, I always have friends that come to visit, and my family there. Some of my mom and I's like best times have honestly happened watching movies or something in the hospital. But yeah, I feel like that's a really big one. Yeah, the support system is huge in my life, and yeah. Sure. Here, my mom has something to say on the matter, so.
So one of the things that she's not mentioning is when you are a repeat patient and you learn what you need, asking for that and being really firm about it. So she's a hard poke to get for IVs. And being able to say, hey, you've got those ultrasounds you can do with the IVs. Let's do that. Let's try that. I think that is a huge part of making that better for people, and not being afraid. Don't be afraid to make people angry. You know, the patient needs what they need. Ask for it.
Yeah, and yeah, learning to self-advocate was definitely very hard, a long process, but it ends up making things a lot easier. Things go smoother, and then you just don't have to get poked as many times, as one example. So yeah, I feel like that is a really big part of it too. Thank you, Mom.
Katie, I have a question for you too.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing what your experience was when you first started Trikafta?
Oh yeah, sure. Honestly, so I didn't really notice any huge differences, but I also didn't notice any, negative side effects, which was good. My lung function stayed pretty consistent across the board. And it was a little bit disheartening because I'd been hearing all the amazing stories and hoping like, oh, and then I don't have CF anymore. I did, obviously. But it was pretty consistent, which honestly, I was okay with once I got over the initial wanting it to be really, really good. So yeah, not a whole lot to say about that one, but yeah.
So if there's no other questions, we will be around for a little bit, so you can come and ask us questions. We really appreciate the vendors. We appreciate having the local CF chapter. They're an amazing team to bond with and to work with. So we want you to be very proactive when the CF Foundation or the local chapter asking you to lobby for something on behalf of the kids. Please do, because the more we make noise to the state and the Congress and Senate about the needs of CF patients, the better we will be. So please, let's keep that in mind, especially with the situation we're in right now, because we don't want funding to decrease. We don't want any of the research that's going on to be decreased as well. And thank you very much for coming in. We really appreciate it.